What is it about the area plan? Because we've heard previously today from two MHKs up in Glenfaver and Peel about their concerns for their area. What is it about it that you're also looking at for the north, and in particular Ramsey, that is so concerning?
I'd like to step back slightly in that I did attend the inquiry last July for 2 weeks, and it was evident to me that the process was quite difficult for people on the ground to understand, and I even heard planning experts saying how convoluted and difficult it was to navigate. So I've appealed to members in Comyn and Tynwald members that in future the process might be clearer and simpler and easier to engage with. My main concern is that there are large tracts of greenfield land on the outskirts of the two large settlements, Peel and Ramsey, that once this plan, if adopted, will be designated for residential development as of the 1st of December, and it discourages people to invest into the brownfield sites that exist all over the island. It's not really supportive, and lip service is paid to brownfield sites taking priority, but I can't see an awful lot in this plan that is going to bear fruit in those sites having a priority. It would be much easier for greenfield sites to be developed as opposed to brownfield sites which sit in the heart of our vibrant town, but we need to make Ramsey more vibrant if at all possible, and that's I suppose the core of my interest.
And Keith, what is it for yourself?
In my opinion, the plan as presented is flawed. It's predicated on a false premise, and that is that there is a housing need that was calculated when there was an anticipation of major population growth in the island. That has not come about. We've had published figures recently that show the increased population from 2011 is 26 net growth. We're not, Marlene and I, opposing the plan from any NIMBY perspective. It's a considered opposition to something that we believe is potentially damaging, has long-term, far-reaching implications, not just for Ramsey in the north, but for the whole island. The plan is at variance. It contradicts government aims and intentions, very laudable, desirable aims and intentions that are embodied in our island plan, in the Built Environment Reform Programme, and the policy of town centre first. Given that the major portion of development opportunity that this plan is greenfield development, my feeling is that it favours not urban regeneration but urban sprawl, and it undermines the viability of what we're seeking, and that is regeneration, renewal and revitalisation of this, the centre of the town, where there are major opportunities for brownfield development.
So, Marlene, while you were on in Tynwald, you led the Committee of Conservation of the Built Environment?
Select Committee on the Built Heritage of the island, and we took some really interesting evidence from across the board, from the construction industry, Manx National Heritage, people who have a real specialism in conservation and the history of our island. So that was a really important report in my view, and I stepped down from Tynwald in February 2023, but I stayed on in that role because of my passion, and I was allowed to give evidence to the court later that year. Unfortunately, they didn't accept the recommendations, one of which was that there should be a small grant scheme that would mirror what used to happen in the conservation grant scheme that existed from 2001 to 2015, when government was looking really for a fiver down the back of the settee and pulled the funding. And the most that was ever given out under that scheme was less than £500,000, but it made a difference. And what I could see was the difference in town centres. People said if you wanted to put a good slate roof on your home or your shop, and you could only afford to pay a certain amount, the conservation scheme could help top that up, keep the character of our towns, and it would be a grant. And it wasn't always means tested, it was the merits of the building. So again, Tynwald didn't accept that. Now, going back to my interest in this plan, when I've looked, there is already a planning approval existing for up to 153 houses on the Vollen Fields in Ramsey, and I think that was 2023. I don't represent the commissioners and I can't speak for them, but when I looked at an observation they made at that time, it included making the point that if those 153 houses were built, the increase in traffic into the town and the demands on the infrastructure, including the stone bridge, would be more than they thought could be reasonably managed. Now, if all the land designated around the town in this plan is successful, where do we sit with that? Where's the infrastructure for the town? There's already struggles with health, dentists, the schools might be oversubscribed, but the infrastructure is not ready for that yet. And so the point I've been trying to make to members of Tynwald, I've written to them all, is that the strategic plan is what should come first and inform all the other plans that come under that. And that's what's urgently needed, and it's already now under consultation. So when I finish this interview, I'm going to look at the last day of the exhibition in the town hall, because that's what's really needed. And if the area plan for the north and west is adopted and successful, I think we'll look back and see this as a grievous mistake at this time.
Keith, you said about urban regeneration, and government has got really big at they're talking about being very supportive of people living above shops, and you said about your own experience of that in the past. But how do you think this area plan, the way it's designed, especially with the greenfield site, will disincentivise people from looking at the potential to take the room above shops and sort of do them up, basically, to make them habitable for people?
Yes, it will do. It's a matter of economic viability. Greenfield development is easier and cheaper than brownfield. Simple as that. Brownfield is more desirable, unless what we want to do is build on greenfields on the periphery of our towns, and then in years to come invite people to have a look and say, these were once green fields. Then we'll walk to the centre of the town and say, this dereliction, this dig hay, this used to be a vibrant town centre. That's the options are as simple as that. The options for the members of Tynwald with this motion that's before them is that consider what happens if the plan is adopted, as opposed to what happens if you reject it. If it's rejected, then we have the status quo. The world doesn't end. There will still be planning applications, there will still be building, there will still be construction. If it is adopted, then we get all the things that Marlene's mentioned and I've mentioned, all the difficulties of urban sprawl, all the impediments to urban regeneration. We've had a number of politicians who've mentioned the desirability. Indeed, the Cabinet Office Minister himself talked about repurposing buildings within town centres, vacant shops and office premises. Ideal. My role, and I'm a semi-retired chartered surveyor, but I'm also an ambassador for the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. I represent the Isle of Man on the North West Area Regional Board in the UK. That affords me the opportunity to see at first hand what's being done in other jurisdictions, in other areas, and see the successful revibrancy that's being introduced in many, many areas, things that we could replicate here on the Isle of Man. There has to be a will to do that, and I believe that will exists within the membership of Tynwald. However, this plan is being brought to them, and it's a very extensive document, with undue haste, not affording them adequate time to take on board all the implications in the midst of an order paper which does have one or two other items. This is number 13 on the order paper. Whatever happens has ramifications far beyond you and I, Arlene. We'll be long gone, but the adverse consequences will still be felt here in Ramsey and on the island generally. That's not shroud waving, that is factual evidence of what's happened elsewhere and on the island.
Marlene, just finally, you obviously been in Tynwald, you know how things work in there. What would you say ahead of this coming to Tynwald next week? What advice would you have for your former colleagues?
Firstly, what I would do if I was speaking, I would thank the team in Cabinet Office in Planning Policy, because the amount of work that they have put into this plan is amazing, and they're a small team, and so this is, I would emphasise, no criticism of them. I'd just like to think that they could be diverted and be able to spend all their time on the strategic plan. I would urge members to pause and consider. If this plan is not adopted, it's abandoned, we're not going to fall off the end of the world. As Keith has said, life goes on, and I'd like to think that members will see the honesty and the common sense behind, hopefully, they can see what we're saying makes a smattering of truth there. So I know there are going to be some members who will speak against the plan, and it needs to be a considered debate, and they need to search their own consciences, because I would hate to think that the floodgates are opened and it's then a plan that's at odds with other policies that exist within government but might not be able to bear fruit, because once the floodgates are open, the tide will carry everything with it and we won't be able to stop it.